have you started to notice that you're seeing people differently, that you're seeing the nature of your relationships differently? And what is that? How is that informing things for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's still very new. And
we're at the end of 2021, beginning 2022 soon. What is it for you that you're really putting in your greatest amount of focus?
yeah, great question. And I always love to reflect this time of year. And when I say this time, it's not wait till New Year's Eve.
What does surviving and thriving mean to you? What's the differentiation?
Surviving is kind of like a negative connotation to me personally.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is Sharon Land, and I am your host of Thrive with Sharon. And I am a holistic psychotherapist, a trauma specialist, a metaphysician, and a healer, and your host today. I never cease to amaze me. The things that I resisted the most in my life are the things that actually have brought me the most joy and connection. And Instagram is one of them. And since I have really just thrown myself into being open and just networking, I have met some incredible people. And today I have Craig Siegel, who I have met on Instagram, actually through a mutual friend, Jennifer LaGuardia, and who we both love. I just want to do a quick introduction of Craig and get the conversation going, because you're going to love his energy. That's all I'm going to say is you're just going to love his energy. So Craig Siegel is a performance coach, a keynote speaker, an entrepreneur, and an online brand expander and host of the record-breaking podcast, The CLS Experience. And when the pandemic hit, one of the things that Craig did is a major pivot, and he actually decided to leave his very successful Wall Street career to start a completely new passion project for himself, which he is now helping others develop their own mindsets and alter their own perspectives so that they can achieve their own goals and their own passion. So, Craig, I welcome you to the show today. And I'm so excited to have this conversation.
Wow, what an unbelievable introduction. It's funny because as a podcast host, I'm usually the one giving all the introduction. That was fantastic. I hope I live up to all of it. Thank you so much for the beautiful words. And I'm excited to be here with you today. The first time you and I chatted, it was just one of those rare instant connections. So I have no doubt we're going to manufacture some more magic together here today.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, that's the thing is one of the things that really impressed me when we first talked is your energy. You just have such wonderful, you're all in. As soon as the screen comes on, like you are all in. Have you always been that way?
Absolutely not. Straight up. And people always ask me, like, specifically more recently, right? Like, what are you on? Like, how are you always so happy? And the truth of the matter is essentially, I spent 35 years on planet Earth trying to find myself. And as you attested to in the introduction, when I made that life-altering pivot in the beginning of the pandemic, and now I'm living inside my vision and legitimately, genuinely doing what sets my soul on fire, I love this stuff, Sharon. Like, I can't get enough of it. Like, this isn't work to me. And as you and I were talking before we went on air, like, we have a full day, but I'm grateful for it all. And just to be even more clear, like, if I had $1 billion in the bank, which I don't yet, I would still be doing exactly what I'm doing right this instant, specifically having this conversation with you. I love this stuff. I love personal development. I love to help people. I love to support. I love to collaborate with awesome human beings like you. So no, I wasn't always this energetic. It just so happens that I've been able to get clarity and kind of alter the path of my life to do what I love. And now I'm just in such a bubble of serenity and just living with gratitude. And I love this stuff.
Yeah. Well, okay. So that leads me into, before we dip into the where you are now and how incredible it is, then what was it like for you before you made that pivot?
So specifically the last 10, 11 years, I was on Wall Street and I made some money. I say that very humbly, like I was in finance, and then I pivoted, and I had my own business where essentially provided loans and capital to business all across the country. Lucrative, but unfulfilled is a massive understatement. I
Mm.
just, I was searching for something more, Sharon, straight up. Like, not to mention in finance comes stress. You know, my last
Mm.
business didn't have that much stress, which was nice, but it also didn't light my soul on fire. And so it felt like I was waking up every day and going to a job. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew there had to be something more. And so a few years back, I had all this built up fuel and energy, and I channeled it to running. And I ran a bunch of marathons, which was super cool. And running is still a big piece of me today. I just ran the New York City Marathon a few weeks back and I love it. But
Yeah.
I was never intending to becoming a professional runner. I was looking for an arena to be a gladiator in because I didn't know what I wanted to do. When the pandemic happened, it provided me an opportunity that I probably should have taken a lot sooner, but as the universe has it, all in due time. And I was just, for the first time in 10 years, I was grounded. There was nothing I could do, right? My business was shut down. I couldn't go to work if I wanted to. Other businesses were shut down. And so I had nothing to do but just kind of tap into that frequency. And I looked around. I saw a lot of people doing a lot of Netflix and a lot of day drink. And I said, that's not going to be me. And so based upon studying NLP and the mindset and all this stuff the last 10 years, I did have some strategies. And so I just asked
Mm.
myself this. I said, what are my gifts and what are my passions? And my gifts, hopefully you and your audience will agree, is my ability to elevate and to inspire, to actually communicate people to want to actually take inspired action, not just hear it. People would always come to me for pep talks and so forth. So that was my gift. Now it's okay. Well, what do I love? What's my passion? This was actually the easy part. I love personal development. I love to replace disempowering thoughts with positive ones. I love to remove limiting beliefs. I love this quantum stuff, this energy stuff, which I'm pretty new to, which is really exciting. I just love all this stuff. And so I married the two, my ability to communicate and my obsession with personal development. And I started my CLS brand, and very humble to say it's exploded over the last year. But the moral of the story is wherever we're at doesn't necessarily mean that that's our fate, or that's where we're going to end up. We always have the ability to kind of become aware, just be mindful and make some adjustments. It took me 35 years. But my message is to let everyone know that a lot can change in a very short amount of time once you commit.
Yeah. Once you commit, and I always say that there's some steps before you make the commitment. And that's kind of what when we had this timeout, right? Everybody had a timeout. And so we all had a choice. Not everybody chose what you chose. Like you said, some people chose because they were exhausted, right? Or a million other reasons, because, burnout is a real thing. And I
It
think
is.
that a lot of people were getting to the point where they were burnt out. Maybe it wasn't that wasn't where you were at, but you had, from what you were saying, like you had this knowing, which I call intuition, right? So your intuition was speaking to you and you were like, I have this gnawing feeling inside of me that I need to follow this. I have no idea what's going to be on the other end of it, but I want to follow it. And not everybody makes that choice. But when it comes to things like mindset, that is so, so, so important. And it starts with the mind, right? Everything begins and it ends with the mind, including, from the minute that we're born, we take our first breath, and the breath is what gives us life. But the mind is what really directs our cells. It's what directs the nature of our health. And so to be able to work with that mind and putting yourself in those arenas, like I laughed so hard when we met for the first time, and I thought he was going to cancel. He just ran the marathon yesterday. Like there is no way that he's going to not be sore, or at least a little tired. You just like this. And that a lot of it comes from mindset, right? A lot of that comes from mindset, but putting yourself in those positions, some people would say, well, there's what is running a marathon or throwing yourself into something, right? Where it's out of your comfort zone, or you have to push yourself out of your comfort zone. What does that have to do with being an entrepreneur? Or what does that have to do with helping to lead other people? And it has everything to do with you putting yourself in positions in uncomfortable situations where you can greet yourself, right? But I want to know what that was like for you, specifically the last marathon that you did, because I know you also had discovered, like, you were on crutches 6 weeks before.
Yeah,
right?
they found there was a tumor that was identified in my foot, and I had to get surgery and have it removed a few months before the marathon. That is accurate.
Yeah. So you had it surgically removed before the marathon, and then you had healing that you had to do, and you ran 20, how many miles? 26?
26.2. And I did it without the physical training, the fastest I've ever ran in my life. And this is a great story. And also, it's so relevant to you and everything that you represent and identify with. So simply put, I was at a speaking engagement. I was training for the Chicago Marathon. There's so many lessons in this story I think that the audience will value from. And we were playing football on the beach with the boys before the speaking engagement, and I injured my foot. And I came home. And again, just to reiterate, I was training for the Chicago Marathon in October. And the doctor said that I had a sprained ligament. I said, okay. He said, wear a boot and let's let it heal. So a week later, I made another appointment, and I came in and I facilitated an MRI because I had that intuition, as you speak about. Something just wasn't right. I don't necessarily know what a sprained ligament feels like, but I didn't think it was this. And so the doctor's like, I don't think that's necessary. I said, do it. So he gave me an MRI. They called me back the next week and they're like, hey, Craig, can you please come in? And I'm like, I can't. I have a full day. Just tell me what it is. Hit me with it. Is it torn? They're like, actually, the ligament looks good, but we did find a tumor in the bottom of your foot. No one wants to hear that. Shook me up. I gave myself, say, about 12 hours of a pity party. And then the very next day, I saw the best doctors Manhattan has to offer. And I ended up making my decision to get it removed because that was the doctor's suggestion. And then ultimately had the surgery. The tumor came back benign, thank God. But I was on crutches, I had stitches, and then I had a little bit of a setback with my Achilles and all that stuff. And so here's the whole cool part of the story, and the whole lesson is this. When I was heading into that marathon, it was like me, kind of from an ego standpoint, like, I'm going to shock the world. We're going to do something really special. Ultimately, the Chicago Marathon was out of the cards now because I was still on crutches. How was I going to run 26.2 miles? But then out of nowhere, I started really buying in and tapping into the quantum, the energy stuff, all this alignment, frequency, vibration stuff. And I could see your face lighting up like a Christmas tree because I know you love this stuff. And let me be honest with you. I had been skeptical of this stuff for quite some time because I was always a mindset guy, an NLP guy, reprogram. And if it was beyond my senses, I just had trouble buying in. Once I didn't have the physical training and I wanted to start running again, it presented an opportunity to buy in, change my perspective, and just surrender and flow. And it was at that point when I went back and rewatched or read The Secret, The Law of Attraction, and all that stuff, and really started to understand how thoughts are an electrical signal that go out to the universe, and the power of intention and getting rid of disempowering thoughts, replace them with positive ones, changing your beliefs, changing all that stuff. And I ended up forming a relationship with John Asseroff from The Secret, who I had on my podcast. We've become good friends since then. And I just started doing a deep dive, and ultimately an opportunity presented itself. Once all the ego stuff was gone and it wasn't about me anymore, I had an opportunity to run the New York City Marathon, which was only 3 weeks after Chicago. It wasn't like it was 6 months. But this time I wasn't going to be doing it for Craig. I was going to do it to honor my dad, who's currently battling cancer, to inspire him the way he inspires me, and also raise money for American Cancer Society, which is obviously a great cause. And somehow, some way, with all the buying in of the quantum, I started to begin to feel really light and free. And although I didn't have the physicality standpoint, I started to feel very good, very liberated, very confident. Everyone's like, do you think you'll be able to finish? I'm like, no predictions. I'm just grateful to have an opportunity to get to the start line.
Yeah.
Long story short, we got to the start line, ran the fastest I ever ran in my entire life. I ran a PR, as I say, a personal record, 3:39 in the marathon. made my pops very inspired, very happy. We did it for a good cause. It was no longer about Craig. And there's just so many lessons that I took from that little 3-month story arc. Number one is understanding maybe you can't necessarily remove the ego, but you could work with it, right? No more I.
Yes.
It was for a
Right.
bigger reason. Yes. A
Right.
bigger cause, so to speak. And then also, even though that journey kind of concluded, being able to not only run, but run so well, like that story ended, but really the real journey now begins with all this quantum stuff. And as it turns out, all the mindset, so it was just the appetizer. So I'm loving this quantum stuff. It's so exciting to me. I'm starting to experience real-time manifestations, stuff that I never thought, I never bought into. I'm now seeing like that. It's crazy. It's eye-opening. And I can't talk about this stuff enough. So that was the journey from the tumor to the marathon.
Yeah, which was not that long ago. The marathon was a month ago. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and I've really enjoyed watching through Instagram some of your talks that you have that, you're really just you're excited to talk about this and share about your own experience about this. And so part of my wheelhouse is I work within quantum metaphysics, right? I'm a metaphysician. So like that's it. And years ago, this was not really very mainstream, right? So I remember someone saying to me, probably X years ago, I remember when the book The Secret came out, and I was so resistant to it because it seemed so commercialized to me, right? And then I finally decided to watch the movie when the movie came out years later. And I was like, oh my gosh, it felt like I was home. Do you ever have that conversation, feeling where you start to, you just go into a space where you have no expectations, maybe even a little bit of skepticism, right? Because I think that one thing that we can agree upon is everyone is so tired of being sold to, right? And so watching that and then finding other people where they're just, again, letting go of the ego, which I think part of the ego is part of what goes alongside of the ego is these kind of transactional exchanges, right? So I'm going to do this so that you do this for me, right? It's like that. And that's really not how things work when it comes to energy and when it comes to really embracing multiple timelines, right? Which is living within the time, within quantum, right? So how has that been for you? And have you started to notice certain people who have you started to notice that you're seeing people differently, that you're seeing the nature of your relationships differently? And what is that? How is that informing things for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's still very new. And the one thing that I'm finding a little challenging is I know what I felt leading up to the marathon when I was really buying into this quantum stuff. And I know what I feel now and just embracing all this cool stuff and like all this meta stuff. But I have a little bit of trouble articulating how it works for me, if I'm being honest, because it's still new to me. But yes, my relationships have adjusted. I see things in a different light, in a different perspective, so to speak. And it's just like, I'm just so much more like at ease now, surrendering and flowing, right? And just allowing, like letting things happen. And like, when you want something so bad and you put that out there into the universe, it's almost counterproductive because you want it so bad that you're almost just as equal as scared not to have it. And so I no longer have that, whereas I used to want stuff so bad. And so now I will definitely put intention out there to the universe because you can't hit a target you can't see, but then I will release and I will detach from the outcome, kind of like I did with the marathon, and real life manifestations are beginning to happen and occur. And I just love this. And to be honest with you, I'd be very interested and curious to hear how you articulate like all the quantum field and stuff like that.
Yeah, it depends on who I'm talking to, but and I just want to I will answer that for sure. But I also just want to say to you what I'm hearing as well is like the surrender and the flow is, to me, the way that I best describe that is there's no pushing and there's no pulling.
Yes.
right? So that's not to say there isn't work and there isn't action. There's drive, but there's no pushing and there's no pulling. There's flow. And to be in the flow of the universe, it's a very beautiful thing. You find a hum. It's fascinating. So I'm sure, and it's different for everyone because depending upon what sensory integration they have the most of when it comes to finding that flow. So sometimes it's an auditory thing, sometimes it's more of a physical thing, sometimes it's a verbal thing. It's different for everyone how they experience that feeling of flow. But when you can identify what sense it's manifesting with more, then it's easier for you to articulate than what it is. But everybody's is different, which is why there's no textbook on it. It's not like, oh, okay, so then this happens, and then this is exactly what happens next. And this is what you tell somebody else to do next. And this is what their experience is going to be, because we're all so unique in our gifts and what we have to bring. So we definitely are also then going to experience this thing, but we're going to experience it all a little bit differently and all a little bit more uniquely. So I love the fact that you're experiencing that. I think it's great. And I love what it does to your energy, because it's like, because you get so excited about things, and you automatically want to share it with other people, which I think it's very special, because I think that, I think Les Brown was the one who said it, where he said, it would be such a shame for you to discover that you have a gift and then to never, ever share it with the world.
It's deep. Yeah.
Right. And so it doesn't matter if it's one little small gift, a nugget that you might have heard, or something that's been a major transformational piece for you in your pivot. Right. So I love the fact that you're so willing to share. But before I answer your question, because I feel like I'm talking a lot, and I really, really, really
No,
want
I
to hear
love this. This is great.
I want to hear more about, now, the here and now, what it is that you are, what it is that you're lit up about, and what it is that your next piece is. Because I know you're really phasing out lots of different things. Like you have this, you have your membership. I know that you're really forming this community and this movement, which I think is really special. And I really, really love it, because it's like that entry point for other people to be able to have these transformational experiences, right? So we're at the end of 2021, beginning 2022 soon. What is it for you that you're really putting in your greatest amount of focus?
Yeah, great question. And I always love to reflect this time of year. And when I say this time, like not wait till New Year's Eve, but like December, like just start really reflecting on 2021. And it's so interesting because I journal all the time, every single day, but I do a specific entry as we get to year's end. So it's so much fun to look back at where I was at in my headspace going into 2021. And it's like, I'm so much different than I was 3 weeks ago, straight up. Like when you do what we do for a living, like you're always learning, right? That's part of almost like part of the curriculum, right? You have to get content and be able to help people and explain and have more stuff to provide more value. So I'm learning so much every single day that I'm so much different than I was 3 weeks ago, let alone a year ago. So I've just evolved so much as a human being. But also a lot of the goals and visions that I had have come to fruition, which is also really cool. So as I dive into and lean into 2022, I'm just super excited to really continue to build this movement. And I know it's a community, but I like to call it a family, like specifically the membership, which I started a few months back. We already have 175 people in there, but it's the right type of people. The integrity is intact. And it's just a beautiful thing. We're watching people come out of their shell. Like you said, like experience transformational, all sorts of journeys and so forth, and just be themselves, be vulnerable, understand it's a safe place, but start to leave their marks on the world and utilize their gifts like you just spoke about. So continue to expand that. And how do I do that? I continue to show up and be just as authentic as I can, tell everyone about my experiences, like the tumor situation, which, by the way, is something I wouldn't have done probably even a year ago. So I've been really exercising my vulnerability, and it not only is it liberating for me, but I see the audience gravitating towards CLS so much more because I guess it's more relatable because it's real life stuff. So just to
Yeah.
continue to show up and just be everywhere. Like our podcast is blowing up right now. We just had Ed Milet on last week, Rob Deerdeck and so forth, John Asser, which is really cool
Love
because
them.
yeah, I get to pick the brains of some of the world's greats. Also, we get to tap into their audiences and just continue to grow. Speaking engagement, we just spoke in front of Fiverr 2 weeks ago, which is $7 billion company, and they love it. They want to do something on the regular now. Just continue to be able to spread the message and just grow the impact. And that's what it's all about. And whereas a couple of years back, it might have been me, I want to do this. Now it's we, right? It's not follow me to the audience. It's come with me. Like we're on this journey together. And that's a big lesson that I learned with that whole ego thing with the tumor situation. I don't believe in coincidences at all. I believe everything is divine and being able to work within that. And so I'm very grateful for the tumor situation, very grateful because I learned so many lessons throughout that whole situation. And I was able to get my happy ending when it was all said and done because I did the work, right?
Yeah.
I surrendered, I flowed, and I detached from pushing and pulling. Yes, I did the work, but I detached from that, as you just beautifully articulated. And so just really extend the reach in 2022 and just open up more eyeballs on what's possible and how much can change in a short amount of time. And I don't necessarily mean success from a monetary standpoint, but spiritual success and maturity.
Yeah. So I love the fact that you've mentioned, I was going to ask about it anyhow, but you just said the word spiritual, right? So you had mentioned the divine, and you are obviously working within the, quantum is also working within some sort of aspect of something that's bigger and greater than ourselves, right? So, which to me is how I identify spirituality, right? So how long has that been a piece for you? And were you specifically religious, or was that something that you just was not really in your upbringing? Or what is all of this also a new piece for you? This thing that's greater than ourselves that we can surrender to.
Yes. I didn't grow up super religious. I come from a Jewish family. We went to temple on the high holidays. That was about it. But strengthening my relationship specifically with God has been going on for the last 10 years, but really like the last couple years, really worked on it, improved upon it. As deep as to say that when I started CLS in the pandemic, I legitimately heard whispers and felt the tap of my shoulder, and I felt guided to pivot from Wall Street and to step into this whole CLS movement to inspire and elevate the world and kind of get away from the Wall Street stuff. And that was very real for me. And now, like, I speak to him every single day. And I'm very close with my faith with God, and I work on that every single day. And I don't know if that, like, faith is the same as spirituality, but in regard to spirituality, like some of this woo stuff and the quantum stuff, that stuff specifically is pretty new to me, and I can't get enough of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I think you'll find that there's just a threading of the needle through all of that, right? And so you can, everywhere you are, as long as you're connected to in as you refer to God, you can find that God is everywhere that you go. Right, including this exploration of quantum metaphysics and all of this other stuff, right? So I love that. And I think it's really important to allow for sharing that awareness of, we have the body, we have the mind, and then now you've kind of capped it off with the third piece, which is spirit, right? Body, mind, spirit. So for me, I'm holistic. So that's like, that's what I live for. That's what I believe. That's what I think that, anything that needs to be healed can be healed from the spiritual piece, right? Anything on the physical can be healed from the spiritual, right? So that surrendering, that faith, to me, that also says that you're believing in something that isn't tangible. Right. And so when you're not looking at something tangible, then you are believing in something that has the potential to be. Maybe it already is, and you just don't see it. And you have to follow the steps. You have to follow the path as they show themselves to you so that you can find your way there. So to me, that's really exciting. I love the fact too, with your CLS family, that you are able to see others go through that process as well. To me, there is nothing more exciting than to be able to help to serve others and be a guide, or however it is that you want to call yourself. You know, you don't want to call yourself a leader. I don't know. What would you call yourself?
I suppose a leader.
Okay.
I don't think that's negative.
Yeah.
When I think of a leader, I think of someone that like walks the walk and practices what they preach, or preaches what they practice, as I like to say. Someone that just has the ability to always elevate and inspire and help people see the best in them.
Yeah. 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 To be able to see the best in someone else. And I think that's really key, because if we're looking and we're always scanning, and this is kind of coming from a trauma lens too, like if we're always scanning for the one thing that's wrong, right, then we're never really going to be able to help others to inspire what's right and what could be. Right. And when we've experienced things like trauma, that is it's a very challenging thing. Right. Which is why we end up being a little bit closed off. And you had said before that it wasn't within your practice to share, to be transparent. You know, you have something was hurting, you had a thought, you had an experience, whatever it is, you had the tumor. You weren't going to share about that. But now something clicked for you to say, I want to share all about this. What was it? Was there some sort of like catalyst for you to be able to do that? Or was it just like, I'm just going to do this?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. The catalyst was the tumor situation. And, you know, for me, it's not very often that I'm really caught off guard. I'm very strategic, and I love to prepare and all that stuff. Yeah. And I understand life happens, of course. But it's been a while since I was really like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. And when the doctor called me back to say, hey, Craig, can you come in? And I said, no, just hit me with it. And he's like, the ligaments look good, but we found a tumor. It really just, I remember feeling like, whoa, I did not see that coming. You know, that's interesting. And for some reason that week, maybe a day after, I just decided to go on Instagram Live to my community, to my audience, 100,000 people, and just tell the world what had happened and what I was going through. And I went on there and I said, transparency hour. This just happened. So it turns out I don't have a sprained ligament. I actually have a tumor in my foot. I'm going to be going to see some doctors to see what's up next week. And I just felt so liberated, because I built such a special, intimate, and a lot of people say they've never seen something like this, just an intimate, really engaged connection with the community and so forth, where everyone just supports and engages and trusts each other. It's just a different vibe, straight up. And I've been in other groups, and so I felt comfortable, and it was so powerful for me, and also for the audience, to see a different side of me and to be able to go on the journey with me, and to understand that, spoiler alert, life has adversity, right? And sometimes it's things we never saw coming. It happens. How do we handle it? How do we deal with it? Right? What's the mindset like? And in addition to all the holistic stuff and the healing and so forth. So I allowed people to come on the journey with me. And that moment ended up spawning the birth of a new weekly show called Transparency Hour, which we have every single week, which was super cool. And that moment, it just triggered something in me to be extra vulnerable. And it's put me in a whole different frequency to this day now. It's like, I'm really open now with the audience and stuff. And I have nothing to hide. Like, everybody has stuff that are challenging. Everybody, right? Everybody goes through some stuff, but why should that be like taboo? It's just a part of life. And to be honest with you, I think it actually strengthens relationships, because people allow are given a little bit of a glimpse into underneath the hood, so to speak, and how you
Mhm.
handle stuff. And I handle it pretty well. I think, I didn't complain too much. I was just, okay, so what's next? What do we do? Now that I'm out of commission physically, what can we do? And I started working on the quantum and all that stuff. And it just was what it was. But that moment specifically definitely gave me an opportunity to exercise radical vulnerability and transparency. And ever since that moment, that's who I am now. And it's part of the evolution of Craig.
Yeah. So, and the interesting thing too is that part of our success comes from having accountability, right? We have to be accountable to ourselves, and sometimes having an accountability partner is great, or even, just the fact that we're going to hold ourselves accountable to somebody larger and greater than ourselves. And in our case, we call that person God, right? So, but forming that community and going live, all of a sudden, like, there's straight up accountability there.
Yep.
You can't just reverse that. You can't put that back in.
Yeah.
So how was there any part of you after you shared that you were just like, whoa, that was a lot, or wow, I don't know if I want to keep doing this, or were you just like, let's go?
It was actually quite the opposite. I felt a release. I felt
Mm.
like I had like removed some shackles that I was carrying around.
Oh, I love
And
that.
yeah. And so now I look forward to being extremely vulnerable and transparent and stuff like that. So I
Mm.
definitely felt a release when I said it. But also, just to circle back, like to what you said, subconsciously, I think I get off on the radical accountability, because when you put something out there to the world, you kind of put that extra pressure on yourself that, okay, it's game time. Like, everybody's watching now, right? You can let yourself
Mm.
down behind closed doors, but you can't let the world down. Otherwise they'll see you as a coward, whatever the case may be. And so I, I step up to that. I thrive on that. I like to put that stuff out there because I think it elevates my game, because it knows that I need to take this very seriously and practice what I preach what I practice, and let the world know that this is what I'm going through. How I'm gonna handle it. I'm not perfect by any means. I'm a very flawed character, just like all of us are. All we could do is try to grow and evolve and be the best person that we possibly can each and every single day, and get a little bit better. And so, to answer your
Mhm.
question in a nutshell, I actually felt a release.
I love that you did. And I think that most people do. Sometimes though, afterwards, there's something called a shame spiral, right? Where we just kind of woo, and that's also completely normal, to experience any of those things. But to continue to take the steps forward, that consistency, and you spoke to that earlier in this conversation, just, keep showing up. You just keep showing up. You don't always have to have, for me, I'm the opposite. As what you had mentioned, you're a very strategic and planner and whatever. And I'm probably more on the, the flowy side. You're just like, um, but there has to be action. At some point, there has to be action. There has to be practice. There has to be grid work in order for you to hold the structure that you're looking to build, right? So for you, you're building a big movement, and you're building a big community and a family and lots of things. And for me, the same. So we don't have to necessarily be super detailed planners, and we don't necessarily have to be super open and flowy, but at the same time, we have to have some way that we can show up every single day and be consistent and be accountable. And I think that's really important. You said a word before, and I want to tap into that a little bit more. And you said, this is how I thrive. And
Yes.
I'm curious. I think it's fascinating what everybody's definition is of thriving and surviving. And for me, it's really important. I'm very passionate about creating a safe presence and creating a safe world, right? Because I think that the more that we can create that, then the more we can grow, and the more we can be healthy. What does surviving and thriving mean to you? What's the differentiation?
Surviving is kind of like a negative connotation to me personally, because like if you ever speak to someone, you're like, how's your day going? Like, oh,
Mm,
surviving, like right away, I'm like, you should be so lucky to be alive to be able to answer this question.
yeah.
It's all about gratitude and a little bit of different perspective. You tilt
Mm,
your head and you look at it a little differently. Like, are you grateful to have a heartbeat? To be able to answer my question, how you doing? Then all of a sudden you're not surviving. In essence, you're doing pretty well, because some people aren't here anymore, at least in the physical form. So thriving to me is just like when you're in that frequency and you're on fire, as I like to say, and like people are coming into your life at the right time, things are happening, manifestations, you're flowing, right? As we talked about earlier, you're thriving and things are good. It's almost like the wind is at your back. You have momentum, feels kind of
mm,
seamless, right? Effortless.
mhm.
Surviving, and like, look, like my dad's battling cancer, is he thriving? That's questionable. But he's doing the best that he can every single day. He stays positive. I keep him positive, and he's doing his thing. I wouldn't like to say he's surviving, because that, like, it just sounds negative. He's pushing through. He's doing the best that he can within his capacity and stuff like that. Surviving to me, unless you're stuck in a desert island, right? And you're trying to get to a ship before you, I don't know, have a heat stroke and pass out, then yeah, you're surviving. I get that. But for the most part, most of us are grateful. There's got to be something you could be grateful for. There's always a choice. There's always something that you can do. Like if you're not in a good position, or if you're not happy with your job or your relationship, you have a choice, right?
Yeah.
So surviving to me is like being complacent. I think there's always an
Mm,
opportunity to thrive and to make a
mm.
choice and to shift your perspective and to get in a better frequency.
Yeah. And so part of what I'm hearing too is like to be in that surviving mindset. We're also then in a victim mindset.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can see that too. I think there's so many different perspectives. And I wouldn't say that if you're in survival mode, that means you're a victim and you're in a victim mindset, but there is a piece of that too, right? I think that we're all shifting. I think collectively we're all shifting. It's by design. The earth is changing, everything is changing, and we, by proxy, have to change and have to make changes in order to adapt. So if we resist the change, then we automatically are put into a position where we are surviving our circumstances, right? And if we look at, we live in the United States, right? We both live on the East Coast, and you're in New York City. I'm very close to Manhattan. So, a lot of our ancestors immigrated in through Ellis Island, right? And I
Correct.
would say that there was a lot of surviving their circumstances, right? There was a lot of becoming a refugee from their country or whatever it might be, and coming here for an opportunity to be able um,
Thrive.
to have a different life and to thrive, right? So even in the most challenging of circumstances, like my grandmother, she had, I think it was 9 siblings, and they lived in a small little
Wow.
tenement, and they lived in Manhattan to begin with, and it was a challenge. But I think with the right mindset, you can vacillate between surviving certain circumstances and thriving within the same environment and circumstance, right? So it is a choice. It is the awareness. And so I also think it's fascinating, Craig, that um, as we're having this conversation, it just shows so much of like just who you are and where you are. You're just like, I don't get it. Like there's always a choice, right? You have your breath, like you
Yeah.
so that's just you're just like, this is the way that is, which is like, that's great that you have that, right? It's great that you have that. Not everybody does. Not everybody
but
does.
but also, and I love that you touch upon that, because it's true. But I want to be clear. It's not that I'm not empathetic or compassionate.
No.
I
Yeah.
absolutely am.
Yeah.
It's just that I like, my biggest pet peeve is the victim mentality. You know,
Mm,
when
hmm.
people just act like that, like like the pandemic happened, like my business was shut down. Like I had to do something, right?
Mm,
Or not doing something was also a choice.
right.
I'm very grateful for the whole opportunity because I don't believe in coincidences, and it helped me find what I was destined to do. But ultimately, like there's always a choice for the most part, right? And so like just the victim mentality and I just don't believe in that because, and I've been guilty of it in the past. I went through some
Mm,
stuff and poor me, pity party and stuff like that, but it doesn't do any good for anyone, specifically the person feeling it. Because, and please take a moment to feel all the feels like I did after I found out I had a tumor, but then get to work. See, like put together a strategy, a vision. How can you make the situation better? What can you be grateful for? How can you change your perspective? There's always something that could be done. So just that victim mentality, it just irks me for some reason.
yeah. Well, everybody has their buttons, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the more you can become a witness to your circumstances, then the easier it is to be able to see how it is that you're playing the role in your life, right? And what role you're playing in your life. And so it can be really challenging when you're um, when feelings are either foreign to you or when feelings are scary to you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it does employ certain activation within our nervous systems, and it does cause us then to see things in a very myopic sense, which then eliminates choice in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, right? So to be able to continue to like you said, let the feelings flow through you, however it is that you need to be able to like let it pass, let them metabolize in some way, but then like, okay, now I'm going to look at this, I'm going to look at it, I'm going to unpack it and, put all the pieces out here in front of me and figure out what it is that I feel is the best decision to make given my choices,
Yeah.
right?
100%. I want to add some context to it too. Like I didn't make the saying up. I know Tony Robbins always says it, but life happens for us, not to us, right? And as
Mm,
long as you know that and you believe that pain is actually a propeller, when something happens that's painful, it's propelling you to something greater. And I think it's God protecting you, so to speak. And so, that's something I should have mentioned to remove victimization, stuff like that. When you have that mentality and that thought process that life happens for us, not to us. When a setback happens or something challenging happens, it's propelling us to something greater, as it did for me with the tumor. Ran New
mm,
York instead of Chicago for my dad to raise money for cancer, to make it not about me. And we ran faster. Now I look back, I'm like, of course, that whole thing happened for me, to identify that there was a tumor in my foot, whatever the case may be. So I definitely want to add the context to that. Like whatever is happening, guys, and girls out there or whomever is listening, it's propelling us to something greater. And once you really buy into that and you realize that, it becomes less and less likely to remain in that victim mindset, because whatever's happening is for the better somehow, some way, even if we can't see it at the moment.
yeah. And sometimes that something greater is going to require us to really, really do some work.
Yes, for sure.
And so sometimes we find ourselves in a situation where our choices have become very limited because of societal structures or whatever it might be. And it may be very challenging and it really isn't fair. And it's not necessarily your fault. Yet we also have to look at, like for you, you realized what your calling was, right? And so you said, all right, this is what I want to do. It's a little scary, but I'm going to make this choice. For other people, the segue and the entree into that isn't going to be as smooth and it's not going to be as easy, but their calling might be like they're going to be the chain breaker of some really significant um, um, traumas or things that have been really unhealthy for generations and generations and generations and generations, or hundreds and hundreds of years, successor to successor to successor. And they're going to have to be the the black swan in the situation, right? Where they're going to have to actually, when everybody else is going left, they're going to have to go right, and that can be really challenging. And we have to greet all of those things within us, to find our own inner strength so that we can be able to do the job that we're here to do. It's
Sure.
not an easy task. It's definitely not an easy task. But sometimes we might feel like we are a fish out of water. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad.
Right.
And some of the greatest challenges that we have in our life, to your point, are some of the greatest awakenings that we could ever have into serving and being our greatest self, right?
Such a powerful word that you use there, awakening, right? Because that's exactly what happened to me. I was awakened, and this whole ego thing, it's like, and also I know you're not supposed to remove the ego. You're supposed to work within it. Like I said earlier, and I saw you light up and smile. That's something I'm still working on it and learning and understanding, but that's what it was for me. It was an awakening.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, to me, like when I hear awakening, it's like light starts to beam from inside, because I'm so passionate about, just like you, I'm just so passionate about others finding that spark within. So I love the fact that you came today and that we were able to have this conversation. I'm so grateful for the fact that we've connected, and I look forward to all of the future collaborations that we will do. We are actually ready to wrap things up, and I would love if there's anything that you really wanted to say today and add in before we say goodbye, just to see if you had anything you wanted to say to the audience.
Yeah, I just want to say that I love this conversation. Genuinely, it went a completely different route than they usually do when I'm a guest on people's shows, and I dug it and I love it. And I love to get deep and pull back the layers and articulate certain things like awakenings and stuff, all the good stuff that we just spoke about. I felt an instant connection to you the first time you and I spoke. I know this is just the beginning of the relationship and the friendship. For your audience, if they love you, they must be pretty special people. Come say hello. Come stop by. I don't bite. I'm at Craig Siegel _CLS on Instagram. And I'd love to interact. And the best part about all of this is, like I said just a second ago, it's just the beginning of our relationship, and I'm excited to explore it.
Yeah, me too. Completely. And very grateful. And thank you so much for sharing yourself today and sharing about where you're at and your experiences. It's I'm sure that there are people who needed to hear this. And it's going to come out right at the perfect time for them, just as everything is perfect in its timing in the divine, right? So
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure. And for everybody else, thank you for listening. And I'm going to put all of the information to follow Craig in the show notes. And in the meanwhile, peace, love, and we will see you next time.
Bye, Sharon.